What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Faqs Project. This will be the best of 2025 edition. This is probably the first time that you heard it here on this podcast, but I feel as though it's very, very necessary for us to basically go through a lot of the comics and a lot of the news stories that basically happened in 2025 that we were particularly following, and as well that we were able to interview with a lot of the creators on this very special program. Of course, I've been your host this entire year. This is actually episode 36 of this year. Good God. I to be honest, I didn't think I was going to do 36 interviews this year. But I'm glad that I did it. I felt as though it was a bit of expansion for this particular podcast to kind of like jump into an arena where I was doing a lot of indie books for the past couple of years, and very seldomly I would jump into a lot of creator-owned publishers and a lot of mainstream comic book publishers as well. And getting to talk to a lot of people about the stories that they want to do has been very fulfilling, especially understanding that every single writer, artist, letterer, colorist loves doing their own work, and I'm very admired to hear that. And that kind of brings us to the first bit of news that happened for 2025 was the total unfolding of Diamond Distribution, which I felt as though was a bit of a scarcity type of aspect that was happening within the community, especially for what it did to a lot of indie publishers. And it felt as though that was going to be a rough thing. If you didn't have your business sense, or better yet, you weren't applying yourself outside of the arms of just the major distribution that you were doing with Diamond Distribution, if you were doing it that way and having the ability to put your comics in comic book stores or through a major distribution channel, if you were outside the realm of doing something through Lunar or Massive Publishing, you kind of just depended on them. And the thing is, for all the bad business out there, and I got to give a shout out to like Comics Beat and ICV2, who basically did expert reporting on this, Graphic Policy, who also did excellent reporting on this, that they just, once their sale ended, they just started withholding books that were paid for, that were never going to hit mailboxes. And then when the bankruptcy tended to happen, and I could be wrong, it seemed as though that for all the wrong reasons, they could continue to sell those books because the bankruptcy had been completed without paying off the publishers that were responsible for those books. And it led to a lot of people basically being very unsure of their business going forward into 2025. And a lot of people had to make some very drastic moves. I know in particular, one of my good friends, of course, Derek Allen, Lonzo Starr from Concrete Comics. He has many arms in this. Aside from the Diamond Distribution deal, he was already making money on the direct market. And then he was still also selling comic books through Kickstarter. So even though the direct market business went away, I'm sorry, not the direct market, the Diamond Distribution business went away, he still had those other arms where he could sell. And he continues to sell on Kickstarter, and he continues to sell through his own website, which is fantastic. But the thing is, it's good to have books that are being placed in certain spots to where they're getting sold. And that just turned out to be like one of the biggest headlines of 2025. A lot of people jumped to Lunar earlier, like some of the big two. Of course, DC had already jumped over to Lunar Distribution. A lot of indie comic book creators jumped to Massive Publishing. And that turned out to be a good sign for a lot of people that did that. But then, for the most part, this led to, I guess, another renaissance of more grassroots type of marketing for a lot of uh, content creators and for people that were putting out books for the very first time. It almost felt a little like 2020, where it was almost like a renaissance of a lot of people like that wanted to put their books out. But then also in the same breath, which is something that you always see out of a lot of indie comic books, is that you saw a lot of people just dip off. And that's the kind of like platform that you see like right there at the end. It was like, do I continue to just keep going or do I not? Now, the other news outside of that is that this was an extraordinary year, retail wise, for comic books in comic book stores. A lot of comic book stores thrived this year, mainly because of the mainstream books that they were putting out, notably the Absolute Universe and the Ultimate Universe for Marvel. So the Absolute Universe for DC, Ultimate Universe for Marvel, which sells out on a global level. First prints, second prints, third prints. If you don't know about that, it's you get an allotment of your first printing. It's almost like the record business. We'll ship 1 million copies of your CDs to a store, but let's see how many you sell out of that million that was made. So with comic books, it might be 200,000 in the beginning. Some contracts are a little different. So like you'll get your first printing might be like 200,000 books. If you go through those 200,000, you get a second printing, third printing, so on and so forth. That Absolute Batman has just like gone through a tremendous amount of books. That's garnered up probably so many printings, it's been ridiculous. But the thing is, that didn't necessarily trickle down to a lot of creator-owned properties. I can say, for the most part, that Exquisite Corpses by James Tynion IV was probably one of those that just like, outside of the big two, was a very good sell out of that universe. I think it's on issue 8 right now, and it's still selling at an enormous rate. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for IDW always does well. Transformers for Skybound Image always does well. G.I. Joe for Skybound Image always does well. As a matter of fact, one of the good books for this very year, Event Horizon, when IDW started to do IDW Dark, and they put out Event Horizon. If anybody does not know the movie, Sam Neill, Lawrence Fishburne, cosmic horror at its expert level. If you haven't seen the movie, go see the movie. But if you haven't seen the movie, the books are available. And the first printing of that book, the Event Horizon IDW Dark issue 1, is in its third printing right now. So that means that the book is doing masterfully well. And the thing is, that was kind of like a one-off horror movie that was like a cult classic. And everybody had thought, is like, I want to see more, but I'm glad that they kind of just stuck to that one frame of movie, just one story. But now you kind of like dive into what the movie was about what the storyline was about. What was that orbit that was inside of that one ghost ship that was just floating throughout space that was causing people to kill themselves, flay themselves, and expertly psychotically go throughout the minds of everybody that was involved on that ship. Christian Ward, Tristan Jones, they are doing a fabulous job with that. And I feel as though that book needs to be read by a lot of people. The fact that Exquisite Corpses is doing phenomenally well, of course, it's another hit for James Tynion IV, who has been doing phenomenal work, of course, with the Something Is Killing the Children franchise. So this is kind of just another one on his banner. Obviously, with the Tiny Onion banner, there's a lot of heads in this. So the Corpse Crew, Michael Walsh, James Tynion IV, Tate Broomball with Everything Dead and Dying for Image, which is like on issue 4 right now. They are doing good work. They're doing good work, and these are creator-owned properties. These are foregone driven stories that you want to see from comics outside of what you know of characters within the big two. The big two, of course, you know the characters. We know these characters. But when you're seeing a story start from scratch, it means something. One of the better stories that I've read this year was News from the Fallout. Chris Condon, Jeffrey Allen Love. I got to talk about it on the podcast. And for one, I'm very drawn to Jeffrey Allen Love's work. The shadows, the grayscale, you never get to see anybody's face. You can almost get like a shadowy glimpse into them. You can, to be honest, if somebody said, hey man, what is this? Let's say the main character in News from the Fallout. What does Private Follows look like? I couldn't tell you. But what I can tell you by the storyline that basically carried throughout him, when I found out in episode 3 that he's black, I had no idea until I heard the storyline being drawn or written in a certain way that Chris Condon was doing, that basically showed me, my eyes and ears, that is a black man. And that was a reveal that happened in issue 3. And of course, it ended and it was just like this fantastic thing because it was a cautionary tale. You had this cautionary tale of somebody black who has been extremely carefree, but the latter part of that is very free. And he was the first one when the bombs went off in issue 1. Note, this is somewhere in southern Nevada where they're doing atomic bomb testings, and one of the atomic bombs that goes off ends up turning everybody into this zombie faction, right? And he was the only one that was extremely cautious about this. But then you come to realize his backstory as to how cautious he actually is. And then you come to meet the people that he ran to when the bomb first went off in the first place, because he went to a diner called Joe's. And you get to know these people, the point of views of these people that work within this small little diner in southern Nevada. And it was just a fabulous book. Fabulous book. And as a matter of fact, Chris Condon is now jumping into doing DC Vertigo work, which I feel is right up his alley. Right up his alley. And that's another big story, because that segue going into Vertigo. I mean, DC Vertigo, also known as DC Black Label, also used to be just known as Vertigo Comics, subsidiary of DC, was one of those particular publishing arms that got me into comics. The Watchmen, V for Vendetta, Road to Perdition, these were very singular, drawn-in comics done by very thought-provoking writers that made you want to read very good stories. And I feel like that's something that's gotten very lost with comics recently, is that people want good stories, and yet there is good stories out there and they don't know exactly where to find them. And I feel like that's always been the point of this show, is to speak to truth of some of those stories, some of those particular brands out there and IPs that you just normally do not see. And DC Vertigo, I feel as though, was one of those that kind of like put that under a microscope and let people just kind of like dive into some just real good work. V for Vendetta. You know, like Why the Last Man. You know, these were just like these, and no, I'm talking about ones that just got adapted. You know, the fact that we have had these particular stories that have been put out through media and have been done so well that people had like Tom Hanks was in a comic book movie. You don't think he was, but Road to Perdition, even though it's like a gangster flick, is a comic book. V for Vendetta, if you saw the movie, is a comic book. Everybody understands The Watchmen, but that is a Vertigo product, even though it's a DC product. You know? But another bit of good news is I feel as though one of the better stories of this year was this one particular book called Spectrum. It was Dave Chisholm and Rick Quinn for Mad Cave Studios. And it was a story about the power of music and almost these singular notions of like taking, for instance, the physical manifestations of sight and sound and their interruption with each other. Like the world was very peaceful at one point in time until sound interrupted it, and it caused a battle between the two. And you see this young woman who is able to channel through decades of prodigies and storylines and feels as though she's about to go crazy until this one particular character who is trying to dismiss these very gifted type of people who listen to music in a certain way. Like if she kind of garners up the lyrics of a particular song, you know, it's an outreach on the world. Of course, they always say the one, if you want to time travel, just listen to a song from a particular era. You will get put there. And I feel like that was something that Rick and David were able to do on a large scale. I think the book was out for 8 issues. I actually have it right here. They actually did the entire volume. This is Spectrum right here. And it's, for one, if you haven't read his Search for Sound, Miles Davis book, Dave's artwork is also fantastic. Rick just like wrote this with reckless abandon, basically focusing on characters that you know and love, but they were given like particular different names. And you know, like the one lead character, of course, works at a CD shop, which is, if you're from a certain era, that just tends to be something that you definitely wanted to do. Especially working in a place where you could listen to music all day. It's probably because my one particular job that I do outside of the Faqs Project is I run a nightclub, and I get to listen to music every day. So it warms my heart that somebody like spoke about music in comic book form and just like basically just drew it into this fantasy world. And it was beautiful to behold, like how it was basically described and then how it was drawn. So Rick and Dave did a fantastic job on that. Next up happened to be, I got a chance to talk to David Walker on the program because we got a chance to talk to about the death of Bobby Hart, which was almost like a love letter to Donald Goines. And if you don't know who David Walker is, he is one of the, I'm going to call the Holy Trinity. Chuck Brown and Sanford Green, they put out Bitter Root, you know, so like these are godlike characters to me. So the fact I got a chance to talk to David Walker, and they had put out the Bitter Root Next Generation story, and it was, I'm going to say 30 years ahead of the original books. The original books were around the Harlem Renaissance, which was around like the 1930s. This one was based around the Montgomery bus boycotts that were happening in the 1960s. The Genu were still like, were pretty thick in Mississippi, like as far as detailing the fear and hate of a lot of white folks and basically honing in on basically terrorizing a lot of black folks that were coming in on these buses from New York to do protests. And the one thing that I feel as though doesn't get talked about enough, because it's done through the allegory of the book, is that the whole bit of Bitter Root throughout every single book, whether it's been the original stories or the Next Generation, is that it's there to defeat hate. And the fact that hate is such a instrument in all of those books, and also true to form that, you know, the destruction of it will cause everything to be right with the world. Everything will be completely peaceful. And how the story of the Sangrier family and how they are able to tackle exactly what monsters are still out there in the world and continue to be out there in the world. Like, they understand, even though they defeat so many monsters as a unit, they know that there's still going to be more battles that have to be fought. And that storyline, the new generation, ran for 6 issues. If you remember, the original Bitterroot series ran for 15 issues. So if you think about it, they have an entire omnibus for the original Bitterroot series. They could literally combine that with the new one, with the 6 issues of the next generation, and almost have this super deluxe compendium out there for that one particular story. And that was an excellent one for this year. Another one that's pretty much out there is one that I can see peeking behind me. Invincible Universe. So, 2 things from Robert Kirkman. Not only did he have the ability to continue and do a spinoff, which I feel like was warranted for Battle Beast, for the Invincible Universe. Obviously, the show is doing phenomenally well. The story itself of Invincible, even though it's done, they're actually going to do a reprint of the crossover between Spider-Man and Invincible that happened maybe around like 10 to 12 years ago. But this particular series, we're just about to get into the point where Battle Beast is being introduced to the Viltrumites for the first time. And that's where this bloodlust that Battle Beast basically has just steps to the forefront. But the thing is, we got to learn a lot more about him. He's not just this ferocious beast. Like, he actually comes from a cloth that's very tribal, of course, very primal, as you would expect, but has a lot of honor. And I felt like that was something that Robert Kirkman has been able to bring to Battle Beast. But he also put together a whole new storyline in the Invincible Universe called Capes. And then even outside of that, in the Skybound realm, he was able to put out another particular storyline that I've talked about a few times here on the Faqs Project YouTube channel, which is Skinbreaker. And Skinbreaker, the fact that David Finch is involved as like the singular artist in there just makes that storyline exactly more vivid. Now, that has just the same amount of tribal, primal abilities as a Battle Beast, but the thing is, it is more primitive. And it's all about the old ways going away in order for things to work a little bit smarter, for people to live a little bit longer. But people are very stubborn, and they're not too equipped in accepting change. So I felt as though that Robert Kirkman and David Finch, even though that issue, it's on issue 3 right now for Skinbreaker, that's going to continue to ramp up. And I feel as though that one's going to definitely make or break. It's going to be a make or break series going forward. They're going to continue that for a very long time. Image just does that. Next up, I got to say, I had a chance to also talk to David Brothers. If you don't know who David Brothers is, if you had read Time Waits with him and Chip Zdarsky for Distillery, which was an excellent book, I got to talk to him about this anthology that he did with Nick Dragotta. Nick Dragotta, of course, you know him from Absolute Batman. He happened to do a series of short stories that he made into an anthology called Good Devils Don't Play Fair. And that was also done through Image Comics. And this was just a phenomenal storyline. To be honest, every single one of these 3 stories could be done on their own. And David's pretty good at that, and I want him to write more. Like the fact that there's this one particular character named Oya, and she's just this like post-apocalyptic vigilante, and the fact that like she goes through these times and tribulations of somebody that she used to be extremely close with, and used to be very good, very tight with, and has to live in a world that's basically eating itself alive every single day. It's a good book. The next one, I will say that stood out to me, there was an anthology series for Mad Cave Studios called Vanishing Point. It was done by Mark Russell. Mark Russell right now is doing Racer X, which is also phenomenal as well. But Vanishing Point just stuck with me. It was a sci-fi anthology. I like vignettes, so you will find, if you give me a good anthology that has extremely like 6 to 8 real good short stories, like I said, Good Devils Don't Play Fair has 3, Vanishing Point has 6, and every single one within Vanishing Point is highlighted in the essence of capitalism, starvation, people not necessarily understanding that there's humanity in everything, whether you're trying to kill it or not. Even though they're brought throughout, like some are like are in the far too distant future, some of them are in alien worlds, some of them are built through like robotics and AI. These are just like the storylines that pretty much like were substantial going through all those particular stories. I felt like Mark Russell had a different artist for every single one, and they were done fabulously. So if you hadn't had a chance to like basically like look at that was also great. I can say Power Fantasy for Image Comics, Kieran Gillen. I think it's on its like second well, it's already been through the second volume. They're putting out books that are going to go into the third volume, which is also phenomenal. I've done a bunch of good storyline podcasts for Wiseacre Comics through a lot of their campaigns that were done on Kickstarter. Whether it was like a story like The Matriarch, Liberty's Freedom, which is one that did not drop this year, but I got to talk to Octavia Etheridge, and she gave me like an entire spiel, and the artwork that's done. I swear, when this campaign does finally go live for Liberty's Freedom, it's going to be one that's going to stand on its head. Wiseacre just continues to do extremely great work. And just note, like, although people are very sketchy about Kickstarter nowadays, there is really good work being done by Kickstarter now. And you just have to, just as you would at a comic book shop, you have to sift through it, like sift through the bullshit, and then like get to the good stuff. I will also say that this year has been a good year for just horror and sci-fi comics. Into the Unbeing parts 1, parts 2, Zach Thompson, that was able to put that together for Dark Horse Comics, which I felt like Eldritch horror, cosmic horror, with Dark Descent. Also, I can even say Marion Heretic, done through Boom Studios. Teenie Howard, a demon hunter nun who is at odds with the fact that the people that she is sworn to kill, she actually has more commonalities with than what you would absolutely think. And she's at an indifference between the church that has summoned her to do this, to basically work off a punishment because she worships a god that's different than theirs, and the witches that just so happen to be running rampant throughout the world. Absolutely phenomenal book. There's even the one particular book that I just bought the second volume to, because I think that just ended on its 10th issue, and it was The Moon is Following Us by Daniel Warren Johnson, which was heartbreaking in like the first 5 issues of a parent's child falling asleep and not waking up, and then going into that child's world, whether it's their dreams and their nightmares, and realizing that somebody is controlling her to the point where they don't feel as though that she belongs to the parents themselves. The Voice Said Kill, great crime book that just completed a 4-series limited release run by Cy Spurrier and Lana Del Rey, which I felt like Oh, I'm sorry, Vanessa Del Rey. I'm saying Lana Del Rey. Vanessa Del Rey. Um, Cajun, Creole, Louisiana, drugs, alligators, patriarchs that are like look like these like sloppy moonshine ladies in the middle of the swamp. So, some people just like create storylines that just have a lot of character to them, and they don't have to do much. But the storyline for that was absolutely great as well. Crownsville, that was just put out through Oni Press. High Strangeness, which was their collaboration with Spectre Vision. They put out a bunch of almost anthology style type of books. Issues 1, 2, 3 were all singular from like I think 1969, 1975, 1984. The first one was basically around the UFO epidemic. The second one was around like the Bigfoot conspiracies. The third one is about like the absent-mindedness of paranoia within the computer world and dementia that's happening to this young woman's family almost at the same time, which is another one that's out there. But there's tons of good stories out there, and I feel as though, you know, there will be a lot more done for 2026. Oh, I even forgot to bring up Author Immortal by Frank Barbieri. That is like on issue 3. These are ones that are going to be carrying on into 2026. But I feel as though at the most, going into 2026, you will see a ton of product that is going to be good for everybody out there. Obviously, I always like to keep an eye out for something that's like this book, like Big Ass Sword by Andreas Bootsbach, which was put out through 2000 AD. Something might just stand out. For one, if I see a title called Big Ass Sword, I'm like, okay. Another big one that just stood out, 23rd Street Books, Drome by Jesse Lonergan. Fantastic book. That, to be honest, that might be on a lot of people's like book of the year. Their book of the year list. Drome has got to be like completely up there because it's exactly what a comic book is. It's done in a very like thick graphic novel type of form. It's maybe around like 150 to 200 pages, and there's not a lot of words in there, but it's about the evolution of a woman that's basically got to bring a violent world to peace, almost in this barbaric style. It's very heavy metal magazine. There's a lot of that in there. It's very Neanderthal, cavemanish, and then all of a sudden it becomes like this spectacular thing. You know, like it's definitely one of those that are pretty much out there. Some of the mainstream books, of course, The World to Come, Christopher Priest, Black Panther. I felt like he pulled the okie doke on a lot of people in the first issue. Had the whole internet up in flames, and now it's on his fourth issue, and Christopher Priest just knows how to write Black Panther. Like, to be honest, like, he don't need to do nothing else. I know that he's done so much over the years. He's a goddamn legend in this game, but if you continue to give him Black Panther shit, I feel like he's going to do phenomenally well. Shouts out to Victor Laval, because he's got to follow that one up, because Black Panther Intergalactic is going to start this month. So that's probably going to be out by the time this podcast drops, and I'll be looking forward to that as well. Some of the other ones: Absolute Martian Manhunter by Dennis Camp, Assorted Crisis Events. Why didn't I talk about that? Another anthology book that was done phenomenally well. There's not a single story in that book that is not throwing me for a loop that I'd like thought about for like the rest of the week. Because at the same time that Dennis Camp was doing Assorted Crisis Events, he was doing the Ultimates, and he was doing Absolute Martian Manhunter. And it's like, how? Absolute Green Lantern, Janoy Lindsay, Al Ewing. Definitely love those books. I mean, who didn't like Absolute Batman? I think, and one thing that I failed to realize until David Brothers told me about Nick Dragata is that he he tools the way that he artistically draws up a lot of these comics, especially Absolute Batman, by his love of anime. And that makes tons of sense. If you think of the way antagonists and protagonists are shaped in a lot of mangas and a lot of animes, they're almost like an exaggerated form. So like the fact that like Bane looked like he was about like 7 stories tall, or that Absolute Killer Croc just was like this. I mean, obviously he was still a crocodile, but he was just like this menacing looking ass. He looked crazy. You know, the fact that he found that this love for anime basically just tooled the way that he was going to create that book. And I feel as though he's doing a phenomenal job. The fact that Absolute Joker just dropped this week, and the fact that there's now like, and I spoke about it, I said this word a lot during this one particular episode, and it's physical manifestations. If you think about something in a certain way and you draw it in that certain way, like if you have a description for the Absolute Joker and you just say, well, the Joker's like a monster, and then somebody says, yeah, let's draw him as a monster, then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, like that just looks bizarre. And the first renderings that you saw of that coming out as the brand new Absolute Joker was like, yikes, that's nuts. But overall, I have to put together our most anticipated for 2026. Going into 2025 has been, of course, a banner year for us. I say us, me, for the Faqs Project. I felt as though it was phenomenal to just get to talk to writers of some very singular books this year. And I hope that if you guys have been on this ride and we've had a chance to have imperative discussions about stories. I'm not here to talk about anybody's top 10 list. I'm not here to talk about like somebody's, love of one particular comic from Marvel or DC. I want to talk about the book that you're working on right now. What inspired that? And I want to know the inner workings of it. That's usually how this podcast goes. But if you care to join me in 2026, we will be continuing this more out here on the program. So for everybody out there, obviously you can follow us on our Faqs Project YouTube channel. You can check us out on anywhere that you're listening to podcasts. And maybe one day, I get back on social media and you might see me there. But other than that, I've been happy to host you guys every single week, talking to a lot of guests. Like I said, we did 36 of these, and we'll get to do maybe another 36 to 40 more next year. All right. So for everybody out there here at the Faqs Project, we thank you, and we'll see you guys next time on the program. Peace.